This is National Master Daniel Johnston, and today I want to share with you a game that I played against the Iron Man of Chess, International Master Jay Bonin. Now, he's been having some health struggles lately, and all the best to him. Jay, get well soon, and I really hope to see you back at the Marshall or other tournaments soon. Now, I'm going to show a game where I actually beat the Iron Man, and he's beaten me quite a few times, some pretty painful defeats. I did manage to get him back in this game. I think this is still the only game where I've ever beaten him, and this took place last year. It was a rapid game. So let's get into it. So it's a Rossolimo Sicilian. I really didn't know this opening. I actually still don't. I maybe shouldn't say that in case some of my opponents are watching and wanting to get prepped up. But basically, my plan here, just develop the bishop, play c3, d4, probably after castling, and just play a normal setup. Try to avoid any theory because the Rossolimo can be pretty heavy on theory. And then after d4, there's so much theory here, I don't know. So I just play like this just to try to avoid having to do any prep. So g6, castles, bishop g7, he's eyeing this d4 square, rook e1, knight f6, c3, castle, d4. Okay, so I executed my plan. I have good center control. On the other hand, he can potentially strike back in the center, which he actually does. So first he takes, and now he plays d5. So looking at this position, it's quite balanced. I think the computer says very slight advantage to white, but really neither side has any trumps. I'm going to, if I were to take, that would be actually a serious mistake, because then takes and I'm left with an isolated queen pawn, and the knight is already blockading it. And usually when you get an isolated queen pawn, you want to try to use these open lines to create some sort of attack. But here black is fianchettoed, so his structure is very solid. No attack is really happening, so this is not a good way to play. Knight c3, takes, possibly knight d5 or taking. Not really a great way to play for white. So I played e5 instead. He plays knight e4, of course, going backwards, that would be way too passive, so knight e4. And I can't just allow him to have such a strong knight in the center, so I immediately try to trade it off, knight c3. And, okay, now he makes a serious positional mistake, which is he takes the knight. So what he should have played was bishop to f5, and it's actually understandable why he didn't play this move, because knight h4 is a possibility. First of all, taking would not be good, because then the d4 pawn is hanging, so then I would just lose a pawn. So that's out of the question. But knight h4 here, threatening to take, double the pawns, although he would get more center control, but this file is getting open. I get the two bishops. This looks like maybe not what he wants to do. And it maybe is difficult to see he can actually drop back and play bishop e6. And you kind of have to see this move, because otherwise it's not so obvious what black is doing here. But the thing is, after bishop e6, white cannot win this pawn, because there's actually an extremely strong move here, knight takes e5. And taking is impossible because of this pin. So bishop f5 would have allowed black to keep good balance in the game. Instead, he takes, and as we'll see, this is a serious mistake, because now I have a very strong pawn center. So this is similar to a French defense structure. Okay, the pawn is not on e6 yet, but it can come to e6, it probably should. And so this is a French structure, but black does not have the pawn on c5 to challenge my center, but I have the pawn on c3. So my center is basically completely invulnerable, and that's going to cause black some big problems. So I already have a significant advantage here. So bishop g4, h3, takes. Okay, this exchange makes sense, especially if you're going into a French structure, want to trade off this bishop. So rook c8, bishop g5, knight a5, and here I actually had a very strong move that I missed. And what I did was simply rook ab1. This is a fine move. It's a very normal move, potentially putting pressure down this file. However, there's a very strong blow here, and that's the move e6. And this move is very strong because, first of all, black cannot just let me take this pawn. Like, let's say knight c4 takes. This is pretty bad for black. This pawn is now a weakness. This pawn is potentially weak. So, yeah, and also there could be some potential problems here. So that's a real weakening of black's position. But if black takes here, then queen g4, and there's no good way to defend this pawn. So this is actually going to basically be the exact same thing, whether I take on f7 first or he takes on e6. We're getting the same structure, which is quite weak for black. And if black pushes, well, that's not so good either, because now this pawn is just a monster here controlling these squares. So positionally, after this, black is in very big trouble. Okay, instead I played rook ab1. Opponent played b6, which makes a lot of sense. Knight c4, it was prevented because of the pressure down the b file. And so by playing b6, defending this pawn now, he might be intending knight c4. Okay, now here, luckily, I spotted e6. So I didn't see the first time, but I definitely did see the second time. And yeah, this is very bad. If we look at this position again, black is basically in zugzwang. Like, it's not easy to suggest a move. Bishop d7 is a big threat, attacking both the rook and the pawn. And yeah, this is pretty terrible. Like, this rook cannot move. This bishop can't really move. This queen cannot move. Like, basically, there are no squares. If the knight goes here, then we have this winning the exchange because this bishop covers b8. So this is very dire straits. So instead of just getting positionally suffocated like that, Bonin decides to take. I go queen g4. And now Bonin made a strange decision. He took on c3, which just lets me take and then take. But it's difficult to suggest moves here. I thought he would play king here, or maybe bishop f6. Something like takes here. If takes, at least he can take back here. I mean, this is obviously pretty bad for black, but I don't see a crushing blow. But rook c3, this just lets me get very quick play. So I go bishop b4, and I'm threatening the rook. I'm also potentially threatening the knight, although I probably don't want to take it. I'm also threatening bishop e8 because this rook is pinned. So rook c7. Okay, first I do take, and this also has the benefit of opening up the b file. So I take, and yeah, I thought that what he would do is play bishop d4, trying to gain some counterplay, and that is what he does. If he takes, well, this is pretty sad for him. I can just play bishop to e8, and then take and win the exchange, and yeah, he's not going to survive for very long. So instead he tries to complicate the game, especially in a rapid game. This makes a lot of sense. So I simply play rook e to c1. And obviously the point here is that I'm threatening the rook because this rook is pinned. If the rook moves, then I'm going to play rook c8 check, winning the queen. So, okay, he could get one check, but then I'm just going to move away, and that doesn't really help him. So he plays rook e7. However, now I simply fork the king and rook, the king and queen rather, take, and black resigned, because after take, let's say this happens, then black is down a full rook. Okay, he has 2 pawns for it, but yeah, just down a full rook, there's really no point in continuing on. So this was quite a nice game. I was pretty happy with this. I think I tied for first in the Rapid tournament that day, which was nice. This was, how many moves? 24 moves, so that was nice. But again, I definitely don't want to gloat or anything about this. Bonin is just simply an amazing player, just a treasure of chess, and I hope he'll return to tournament play soon. Obviously, this was just simply a bad day for him, but I did think this positional domination that I was able to get was pretty interesting. And then this e6 blow, I especially like this position after f6, bishop f4, where black's pieces basically have nowhere to go. So this is hopefully a lesson of why you don't let your opponent just get such a massive center like this, because you can end up suffocating, like in this game. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you in future videos. Make sure to like and subscribe, and good luck with your chess.